The Consulting Success podcast is powered by the Clarity Coaching Program. If you'd like to work directly with the Consulting Success team and receive personal coaching and support to optimize and grow your consulting business, marketing, and revenue, visit consultingsuccess.com to find out more and apply.
Welcome to the Consulting Success Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Zapersky. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into the world of elite consultants, where you'll learn the strategies, tactics, and mindset to grow a highly profitable and successful consulting business.
Hey everyone, it's Michael Zapersky here with Bajer. Aga, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Been looking forward to this conversation. So Aga, you are the founder and CEO of culture strategy firm, which is called Bajer and Associates. You've worked with companies including Toyota, PwC, Porsche, Citibank, and many other well-known brands. You're also an author, a keynote speaker, and you host a podcast called the Culture Lab Podcast. You started your firm in the summer of 2017, I believe, roughly around there. And previously you were working at PwC. What kind of went on? What was the driver for you to leave such a well-known brand like PwC to start your own consulting business?
Yeah, it's always an interesting question. And I had to ask this question myself many times. What was the catalyst? Because it's always a process, right? It's never an event when you take a decision like this. And I eventually realized that I've never really had a job in the sense that I never really felt like, oh my God, it's Monday. I really can't go to work again. I was always excited. So I loved my job in PwC. And so it definitely wasn't an easy decision. But at some point, I realized that I'm outgrowing what I was able to do there. And what I mean by that is I wanted to focus on one specific area, which was culture. In PwC, as I'm sure many other consulting companies, you are usually requested to be a generalist, so covering many different areas. And basically what you end up doing is working a lot out of what I call, and many other people call, our genius zone. And so it felt like it's not exactly what I wanted to do. Plus, of course, managing a large team as well. And so you end up spending a lot of time on stuff that is not really super exciting. And also from the point of view of purpose and how you add value to clients, it felt like I'm not really in the best space. And so after, a lot of thinking and reflection, I decided that it's time to just strike out and set up my own business.
Yeah. And before we dive into that, you mentioned that it never really felt like a job for you, right? You just really enjoyed the work that you were doing. Where does that motivation come from? Or what do you think, if you have anything to share that maybe people who might be even in their own business right now or working in a corporate role, not everything is perfect, right? I'm sure that you also had some challenges when you were at PwC as well as other roles. Yet it sounds like your mindset and your viewpoint was always quite positive. How do you channel that? How do you think about, moving forward when you are encountering kind of those challenging or sometimes just quite dreadful and painful, situations that do pop up?
Yeah. And actually, the reason that I am a culture consultant is because of that, because I do realize that for many people, it is a challenge. And it's not so easy to find that energy and motivation to get up in the morning, especially on Mondays, right? And so absolutely. And I think partially, it's probably just the way I'm my brain is wired, because I remember myself being a kid. I would always be immersed in doing something that was completely I didn't even realize where I was. I was just completely into it. And
an example of that? Like, what's one thing that you did when you were a kid that you were just fully focused on and immersed?
Yeah. So I used to play basketball because of my dad. So he was a basketball coach. So that's one of those areas, you play and of course you are in the flow and it's amazing. I used to draw a lot. I used to write as well. So these were sort of activities that really put me in that state of flow. And I have a lot of passion for becoming better at something. So I think that things that really excite me is where you need to develop a skill or some sort of craft. And I think most of my satisfaction actually comes from feeling like, oh, I'm actually better than I was yesterday. So that was quite exciting for me when I was a kid, just whatever I was doing, making sure that I can do it better than I could yesterday. And then, and so basically this experience that I had when I was young was completely misaligned with what I experienced when I got my first proper job. Because first of all, I looked around and I realized not everyone feels like that. And second of all, I was also in a position of being a boss. We set up a startup with a friend of mine. And I realized that I am not really capable of creating an environment where people feel as passionate about this business as I did. So that was quite disappointing. And that's why I dived into this whole topic of leadership and culture and so on and so forth. But to answer your question, where this comes from, I think partially, definitely the way I'm wired and my personal motivations, definitely wanting to improve and finding that joy in mastering a craft. I think that's the thing that just keeps me going.
Will you say, I mean, for those who may not be wired the way that you are, or I think I am, to a degree as well, who maybe, they are feeling like they know they need to get something done because it's going to be important for their business or for their future. Yet they have, they faced, some challenges. They struggle to actually take those steps forward. What advice would you give them? Like, I think you were hitting on something really important there where you talked about looking at really mastering something and being able to look back almost with no regret, know that you kind of gave it your all. And I'm putting words into your mouth right now, maybe, but what would you say? What advice would you have to someone who, again, is looking at the future going, yeah, I know I need to do something, but they're just not getting it done?
Yeah. So I think the first thing, and I do this as well, by the way, so it's part of my process. Even today, I still have a journal, and actually I can even show it to you. This is my journal, and I write in this journal every single day, reminding myself, why am I doing what I'm doing? And so I think, just like Simon Sinek said, really knowing that why behind our goals and connecting to that on a daily basis, this is something that generates a lot of energy for me. Because obviously, there are some parts of growing your business that you are not entirely excited about because maybe they don't have this element of mastering craft, or they're just administrative tasks and you don't want to do them. So definitely putting this in a bigger picture and really looking at your goals and what you're trying to achieve and thinking, what is the ultimate goal? Why am I trying to achieve this? And how am I going to feel after I accomplish that? I think that this part is quite important. And I think particularly important focusing for me is on how we want to feel and then bringing that energy into our daily life as well. Because, when I think about my big goals, and ask myself, but what will it do for me, right? And why do I feel so passionate about this? When you really peel back the layers, you realize that it's all about feeling useful and helpful and needed by someone. So really basic human needs, and connecting that on a daily basis, I find this quite powerful. So this would be my number one advice.
Yeah.
And second piece of advice that I have for people when they sort of struggle to get traction is start small, really baby steps. I think it's so important because we set huge goals and it excites us, but also overwhelms us. And then we don't feel like we can find the courage to start that journey, or it just simply feels overwhelming. So I would say, saying, okay, I want to go there, but what does that mean for today, right? What will I have to do? And even if I have just half an hour to work on something, what is that work that I'm going to do today?
Yeah, really great advice. Thanks for sharing that. So you decided PwC, great experience, but you want to realize your full potential to be able to really specialize and focus on the area that kind of gave you the most fulfillment, the most interest, be able to develop that area of mastery. What did you do? Kind of take us through the first steps of you're leaving PwC. How do you go about building your business and starting to get clients for your business? Walk us through it in as much detail as you can. Like, what were the first few things that you actually did to get the business up and running?
So the first thing that happened, even I think before I take the decision to leave PwC, was that I started working on a book and I co-authored a book while I was still in PwC. And I think that subconsciously I was preparing myself for striking out on my own. Right. But it definitely wasn't a conscious decision at that point. But obviously, as anyone would imagine, it was helpful when I finally decided to have a little bit of IP and having a foundation on which you can build. But also, I am really super appreciative of the support that I got from PwC, because actually my transition had been very smooth. I spoke to my boss and we talked about what would be the best way for me to transition out of my job and for a period of time, I was doing a little bit of work for them as well. And that helped me to set up my business. So basically, I had some income coming in as I was developing the business and gaining some new clients. And a very, very specific thing that I did also as I left PwC is I just reached out to some of the clients where it didn't seem like there would be conflict of interest. And I said, hey, I'm on my own now, and this is what I'm doing. So I'm focusing on culture right now. And it would be amazing if you'd like to meet and talk. So I really started building that network from a different foundation. So telling people that I have my own shop right now.
How much of that initial message was, hey, like this is what I'm gonna be doing now. I'd love to see how I can, like, did you go the direction of, I'd like to see how I could maybe help you? Or like, was there a bit of kind of a promotional sales element to it? Or was it more, let's just meet for a coffee? Or how did you kind of position it to work best?
So for me, it has always been about being of service, right? So definitely I've never used this approach, and it has worked really well for me. So I can definitely confirm that being generous and being focused on the needs of our clients really pays off in the long term, right? Yeah. It doesn't pay off in the short term. And I think this is where a transition out of a job and into consulting can be challenging sometimes, because you need to build those relationships. So as I said, I was lucky because I had some work from PwC during that period. And so basically my strategy was something that I've been doing all along, which was, how can I help? How can I be of service, especially in this area? Because I feel like I have a lot of value to add in this area. What are you thinking about? What are your needs? What are your worries? And so we just had a conversation about the business and what's happening for them without a sales pitch. And it was interesting because in some of these meetings, I'll never forget one meeting that I had, one specific meeting. I didn't know what to expect. I arrived at the client's office, which sounds completely crazy because nowadays we don't get to meet our clients in their offices anymore. But I walk into the office and a receptionist takes me to a conference room, and it's a huge conference room with many chairs. I didn't realize that, but the whole senior leadership team was actually during that meeting for that meeting. So that was a big surprise. And we talked about their issues. And then literally on the spot, I stood up and started writing some things on the flip chart for them to explain something that I wanted to share with them. And they were like, okay, so when could we start doing this together? So this was, for example, one of my meetings. So it wasn't my intention to sell, but I think when you are approaching this with this lens, how can I help? Obviously, when you're solving an important problem for clients, some of the clients, not all of the clients, but they will want your help. So this is how I got my first consulting gigs, basically. And talking to people about their problems and helping them to fix them.
While we work with a lot of seasoned and experienced consultants here at Consulting Success, I'm often contacted by new early stage consultants. Invariably, the question I'm asked is, what are the steps I should take to become a successful consultant and grow my consulting business to my first 6 figures per year? Well, I'm excited to announce that we've opened the doors for our Momentum program. This is our most popular program for early stage consultants, and it has helped almost 1,000 consultants to start, run, and grow successful consulting businesses. It gives you the step-by-step plan to help you with your messaging, your fees, and pricing strategies, how to win more proposals, how to go to market more effectively, developing a marketing system to generate leads consistently, and so much more. And right now, until September the 19th, you can sign up for Momentum and get 50% off the regular price by going to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO. Only 100 spots are available to join Momentum and get 50% off. This deal is only available until September the 19th or until all 100 spots are gone. We won't be opening up new spots in this program for several months, so don't wait. Go to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO.
For the people that you met and who did not say, hey, let's get started right away, because I'm sure there were some of those as well. What did you do, and even what do you do these days in terms of following up with those people and staying top of mind? Do you use a CRM kind of tool for that, or just kind of walk us through what's your best practices to make sure that you are visible in the mind of your ideal client and that you're able to continue to provide value for them?
Yeah. So I think two things. One is really technical and another one is sort of mindset related again. So I'm a big fan of Seth Godin and he's my big mentor. I did a lot of his seminars and this whole philosophy is absolutely about that. So how can you generate value and create a tribe, create a following of people who will continually get value from you? So I thought, okay, what would be my avenues to accomplish that at scale, right? Because of course, one thing is those one-to-one contacts that you have, but to grow a number of people that you can reach, I needed to figure out what would I do and how could I do that? And so I decided that definitely putting content out there is going to be really important for me, but I also needed to think what sort of content. And I wanted to write the next book. I didn't at that time. I decided that a podcast would be a better solution at that time. So the Culture Lab podcast right now is probably one of the most popular podcasts actually on culture. We've grown so much in the past 3 years. And so that has been tremendously helpful to build the business. And I've had a lot of opportunities that came from this. Not immediately, but it takes time as well, but they did. And then we also have a newsletter, and I'm sending out an email to clients and people who are on the list. And in terms of tools and technology, I'm using ActiveCampaign. So that gives you a lot of opportunities to personalize messages depending on what people are interested in. So that has been my strategy: podcast, writing, and right now we're also producing some free courses for people that they can follow. And we capture people's emails, of course, this way and make sure that we don't abuse them and we continue to deliver value to them.
Right. So it really sounds like you're investing heavily resources and time and energy into content, which is really a long-term game, right? As we kind of talked about before, I think a lot of people struggle with that because sometimes it's hard to even just start producing and creating content, but then to know that it doesn't necessarily pay off right away for some people is challenging. Any advice that you would offer to someone who's thinking about going down that path, whether it's videos or podcasts or other forms of content, just that, from a mindset perspective, or maybe something a bit more tactical that you found just to be true for you?
So there's one thing about producing content. I think that we tend to underestimate how much effort and time it takes. And so one of the things that I've learned during this process is that it's good to have focus and be realistic about how much bandwidth you have to do those things. And, looking back at all the different things that I tried to do, I think if I were to do it all over again, I would pick 2, maximum 3 things and do them really well, rather than trying to do a million things, just, not so well, kind of average. So that would be one piece of advice around content. And then a really important thing is establish a practice. So whatever content you are producing, is a podcast, fine, or if it's writing, newsletter, whatever, it's consistency that really makes a difference. And to be consistent in producing content, I find that we need a daily practice, because otherwise it just gets pushed away. It can be even 15 minutes. That's absolutely fine. And so for me, I block my mornings for creating content. These are my best productive hours. I've extended that now by finding a hack with my nutrition as well, because basically after lunch for me, I was dead. And I discovered that if I have something that's called bulletproof coffee, I can go on for 2 hours longer. I don't know if you...
I know bulletproof coffee. That's essentially for people who are listening, from my understanding of it is, it's special coffee. You can get the brand Bulletproof Coffee. It's Dave Asprey's brand, and you mix in butter, right, with the coffee, or is it some kind of coconut
MCT oil, which is basically Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so for people who have never heard about that before, it probably sounds revolting, to drink like butter or oil in coffee. Right. But I have had it, and it's
delicious.
Yeah, you can get used to it.
Well, I think it's actually quite delicious. I tried doing it with ghee, which is clarified butter, and that was not so great, but butter is great. Yeah. So I actually quite like the coffee, and I'm not using Dave Asprey's coffee, but just regular coffee with butter and MCT oil.
But I do wonder, you being based right now in Milan, Italy, how Italians feel about you putting that into your coffee, because I've been
they
to
would
Italy
be
many times.
revolted.
Yeah, they're probably a bit shocked. Like, what are you doing to our coffee culture?
Actually, during one of the sessions that I had with my clients, because what I do is it's quite a large coffee, right? So it's a large glass and I drink it in a glass. And so I was drinking it and people were completely shocked. Like, what is this? What are you drinking? So yeah, it is revolting to Italians, but it definitely gives you some energy. So I can stretch now my creative time to approximately 2 or even 3 p.m. on some days, which is great. But blocking time for creative work, making sure that you really prioritize that, I think that's key for me.
Yeah, completely agree. I'm very aligned. I mean, what you said there about the blocking the time, I often holy time, because it's just time you have to really carve out. And then that keyword you mentioned, consistency, so important when you're creating content. I think that's where a lot of people fall off, is they'll start writing a few articles for their blog or think about a podcast or some videos, and they don't see a result right away. They say to themselves, oh, I guess this isn't working. And they try and then go do something else. But for anyone that's been in the content kind of, game for some time, that it is a process. It does take time. You got to stay committed to it over the long term. And when you do, great things typically do happen, but you have to keep for the longer term. I want to just flip for a moment. I mean, you talked about since COVID, right? Not really being able to do in-person meetings. I think regardless of where you are in the world, you've been impacted in one way or another by this. And who knows how things will return, or whether they will return, or what things will look like going forward in the future. You offer what you call a virtual boot camp, right? The Culture Strategy Boot Camp. Take us through, what does that look like, and how has that changed, if in any way at all, compared to before COVID?
So yeah, it's interesting, because actually before COVID, I was doing a lot of traveling and a lot of face-to-face work. And I love that. And I miss that. Okay. So I just want to say that it's not like, oh, everything is great now. But it has always been a plan, though, for me to take what I've learned over the years to a larger group of people that wouldn't have those geographical limitations. Not everyone can travel for a workshop and so on and so forth. And so I've been thinking about how to take some of that work online. But as I'm sure you know, and many of your listeners know, when you are a consultant, you really don't have that much time to develop many of your ideas, because you are working in the business, not on the business. And that had definitely been my experience before COVID. So I spent a lot of time on airplanes and airports, and a lot of energy was spent there, right? So now doing this work, finally, first of all, the plan that I had got accelerated. And doing that work virtually, going back to your question, it has positive sides to it. And of course, you lose some stuff as well. But that particular product, the Culture Bootcamp, I think it actually works better than the face-to-face thing. And let me explain why. So normally what I would do in those cases, if I had an open house kind of event for founders and leaders, is they would come for a 2-day workshop, do some work, learn a few skills, and then forget about it, right? And so now when you have 3 months where you have a check-in call, coaching call every week, and you get some prompts on daily basis, where basically our promise is you can make a difference in 15 minutes per day, but you need to be consistent. So it's that same philosophy. And I find that people engage with, it's easier to capture a super busy audience like founders and leaders in organization when you can tell them, it's not going to cost you a lot of time. You don't need to block out a whole day, and it's going to be an ongoing relationship where you also start building a relationship with other founders and other leaders. So yes, it's not as intimate as the in-person meetings, or maybe actually I take it back, because I think intimacy is there and people do build really deep relationships. It's just a different kind of intimacy. And I think for some people, it's even easier sometimes to connect and be vulnerable and open up when they are on a Zoom call.
Right.
It might sound paradoxical, but I think especially for introverts, it's less confronting and less threatening, because they are in their own home, in a comfortable environment. And so I find that there are upsides and downsides to that. And overall, if you ask me, do I feel like the situation has had a negative impact on the quality of experiences or the services that we provide to our clients, I would say no. It's definitely different, but based on the feedback and the value that I see we can create, it hasn't been really less. It's been just different.
And I go, why have a boot camp? I mean, this seems like a very productized offering, very structured, right? So there's a lot of repetition in terms of what you're doing. So you're able to essentially develop mastery. I mean, that sounds like the positives, right? Of a productized offering like that. But why did you specifically choose to create that as opposed to just focusing on going into organizations on a very custom type of basis to do culture work with them?
Yeah. So it's not an either or proposition for me as a consultant. So of course, I'm doing customized support in organizations in-house as well. But one of the reasons that I wanted to create the bootcamp, because my mission is to create a global community of leaders who are culture practitioners. And these days, when you ask leaders, they think that culture is still the job of the HR. And so you really don't have, I think, that critical mass of leaders that could make a difference. And for me, my dream is seeing more culture first, purpose-driven companies really taking the world over, right? I'm really rooting for these businesses that are purpose-driven and culture first. And so I know that I will not be able to make that impact and create that difference, on scale if I just work with clients, supporting them in a direct in-person way. And so this is, I think, my way to connect leaders and create that community because it's a cohort-based program. The big plan in the future is that we will have hundreds of companies coming on this program. And a huge emphasis is on peer support and mastermind groups between peers rather than, just being facilitator-led. So there's support, but a big part of that is peer learning. And I think this is actually the future of online learning. Looking at the numbers, when you look at the traditional online courses and the completion rates, it's somewhere around 12%, which is appalling and terrifying because when you think how much work goes into it and people pay sometimes really significant amounts of money for these courses and then almost no one finishes them. So it's terrifying. But when you look at cohort-based courses, the completion rate suddenly just goes to 90, 95, even 97%. So it's incredible. So I think the future is there and definitely I want to go where, the puck is going.
Do you find that the bootcamp structure tends to be a starting point that leads to the more customized engagements? Or is there a different order in terms of where you see most of the initial flow of new business?
So this has been, I haven't tested it yet because we're just launching the bootcamp. I've been doing similar events with clients, but not exactly that specific bootcamp. But based on the other work that we have done, what I have seen when it is an open house kind of program where you have many companies participating together, usually, yes, that's what happens. So a few of the participants will say, this was great and we want more. So can you help us? Right. Yeah. So I think that this will happen as well in this case. But of course, this needs to be tested and we'll see.
Fantastic. Well, Aga, I want to thank you so much for coming on here again today. And where should people go to learn more about you and your work? Check out the podcast, the book, all that other good stuff. Where's the best place to find you?
So the best place to find me is my website, which is agabajer.com. And when people go there, there is a place called resources. And when people go there, they can find a lot of useful resources that they can download. So I would suggest that and also connect with me on LinkedIn. And apart from that, I just want to say thank you for the work that you are doing. It's pretty awesome. And I've listened to a few episodes of the podcast. And I think it's such a super important work to help consultants succeed and make a difference in this world.
Thanks so much, Aga. I really appreciate that. It means a lot. And we're going to make sure to have all those links to your resources in the show notes. So everyone head on over to consultingsuccess.com and just type in AGA for Aga's first name, last name spelled Bajer. We'll have all that linked up. But Aga, again, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. For more episodes and to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, head on over to iTunes. And if you'd like to develop consistent lead flow and a highly profitable consulting business, learn more about our coaching programs at consultingsuccess.com.